What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another free agency video for the Detroit Lions. And today, we are doing something a little bit different. Today, we are taking a look at one specific Detroit Lions free agency signing. I'm sure we'll at some point do this with every single signing the Lions have made and spotlight that player. Take a look at that player, what he brings to the table, and how good of a signing was it for the Detroit Lions. Today, we're taking a look at the biggest free agency signing that the Lions have made so far and likely will make throughout the rest of free agency. That is receiver DJ Chark. So let's get it started.
The city's been down and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up. And then it's going to take two more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to our video. Glad you guys are here, and we're back with another free agency video. But this is the fun stuff, all right? It's not just talking about a signing or the breaking news. No, this is diving into that player, that individual that the Lions went out and signed in free agency, and taking a look at what kind of impact we could be looking at going forward with this player. And today we're looking at one of the bigger names that the Lions will likely bring in this offseason. That is wide receiver DJ Chark from the Jacksonville Jaguars, at a position of need where the Lions have made it clear they wanted to add help, whether that's Antoine Randall, saying that we want to sign a free agent receiver, we wanted to bring back Josh and Khalif. Lions have done that, and they want to draft two receivers, according to Antoine Randall. And then you have Ben Johnson, who really just broke down the type of receiver that they were looking for. And after diving into a lot of the film on DJ Chark, I got a feeling that the Lions got exactly what they were looking for. It still leaves the draft open to draft one or two receivers, maybe even more, who knows, in this year's draft. But before we get into that, I first want to talk a little bit about this picture that was posted on Instagram from DJ Chark. This kind of sparked the whole thing. Well, not really. Actually, I was going to do this video anyway, but then I saw this on Instagram and I was like, oh, this is perfect. Perfect timing to do a video like this. DJ Chark posted pictures on Instagram of him putting in some off-season workouts, but he wasn't doing it by himself. He wasn't doing it with some random guy off the jugs machine. No. This was with some current Detroit Lions. He was putting in some work, was of course quarterback Jared Goff, which you love to see that, right? Jared Goff, he's going to be the quarterback next year. So those two working together, that's awesome. But it wasn't just those two. You also had two other receivers that were also working out with DJ Chark and Jared Goff. Those two receivers, I'll give you a second to guess if you haven't seen the picture yet. I bet you can guess them, but I'm going to leave it out there. Who do you think those two are? All right, now that you got your guesses in, the two receivers that also were working out with those two were wide receiver Josh Reynolds. Of course, it had to be Josh Reynolds, right? The connection that he and Goff had. Obviously, he had to be there working out with him. And receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yes, the outstanding rookie that the Lions had last season. Incredible. He was breaking records last year, especially in the second half of the season. I actually saw a stat today. I don't know how true it is, but Amon-Ra St. Brown had the most catches last season without a drop. What? Are you kidding me? Hey, that's a rookie, man. Amon-Ra St. Brown was awesome, and we expect that going forward, that he's going to get better and better. You have to love that draft pick. So I just wanted to start there. By the way, Amon-Ra St. Brown put out a tweet because the Detroit Lions are considering possibly updating their uniforms for the 2023 season and beyond. They said for 2022, they're not going to be making changes. So for anybody that was looking for different uniforms next year, that's not what's going to happen. However, for 2023, we could see that for the Lions. And Amon-Ra St. Brown put on Twitter that he was thinking, how about black uniforms? Now, hey, anybody in the comment section, I need to know your thoughts. What do you think about a return of some sort of black uniforms? Maybe not like the old ones, but some sort of black uniforms. Personally, I'm all in for that. I love the black uniforms. They don't have to be like the old ones, exactly, but I love the black uniforms. Those things just look mean, man. I love those. So comment down below, thinking for Lions uniforms going forward, but I would love some sort of black uniform, some sort of black jersey that the Lions could roll out there. Ooh, that would be maybe some all black with some, Honolulu blue numbers. I don't know, something could be really fire done with that. We'll see what ends up happening, but that's kind of the comment question of the day. We haven't done that in a while, so it's good to bring that back. But now let's talk a little bit about DJ Chark. Do a quick little background. Who in the world is DJ Chark? Well, if you didn't see the video when we signed, DJ Chark is a former second-round pick back in 2018 out of LSU. Really had a great performance at the Senior Bowl that season, where he had 5 receptions for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that, of course, helped his draft stock. But what also helped his draft stock was what he did at the Combine. having a 40-inch vertical, that kind of explosiveness, while also putting up a 4.34 40 time. Those two things, and 16 bench press reps. By the way, I got to throw that out. For a guy that's listed as under 200 pounds to have 16 bench press reps, we saw St. Brown put up a lot of bench press reps as well, which I think does translate to the field, and we'll talk about it. But 16 bench press reps at 6'4", 198 pounds is where Pro Football Reference has him listed. So this is a former track athlete, so you know he kind of has that background, but with that size, that explosiveness shown in the vertical, and then of course some of the play strength that you will see on his film at 16 bench press reps. So that's a quick little background. He's picked up in the second round by the Jacksonville Jaguars, but unfortunately with the Jacksonville Jaguars, he has not joined a great situation. There's been a lot of movement there. Of course, this past season they drafted Trevor Lawrence, which was his lowest statistical production season. He only played in 4 games. Unfortunately, he was hit with the injury bug and knocked him out for the season with a pedal ankle fracture. So that knocked him out blocking in a week 4 game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Misses most of the 2021 year. Before that, in 2020, he had a pretty solid season. He played in 13 games in 2020. We did see him miss some time. He missed some time with a chest rib sprain. He also missed some time with a leg shin bruise, lower back injury that sidelined him for a game, and then he had a pedal ankle sprain, which forced him to miss an end of the game, but he came back the next week. It's not like he missed a tons of time in 2020, but he did ultimately end up playing 13 games. Remember, in 2020, there was only 16 played. So he played 13 of the 16 games, started 12 of those, 53 receptions on 93 targets for over 700 yards, 706, 5 touchdowns, and 13.3 yards per reception. But the year before that was his Pro Bowl season. It was really his breakout season, his second year in the NFL in 2019 when he played in 15 games. So that's the big thing that sticks out, is the fact that he was healthy. That's very helpful. 15 games started, 14 of those games where he had 73 receptions on 118 targets for over 1,000 yards, 1,008 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 13.8 yards per reception, while also finishing as fantasy football's number 19 receiver in terms of production that he put up. He was over 20% of the receiving production that they had on the team that year, so that was definitely good for him. And then his rookie season, which was not super productive, he played in 11 games, didn't start any of them, 14 receptions on 32 targets for 174 yards and no touchdowns, 12.7 yards per reception. But one thing that has been clear with Jacksonville, they have had a lot of movement going on, and that's as a whole. That's not just at the quarterback position. Yes, at the quarterback position, he hasn't played with the best quarterbacks, whether that's a guy like Lutton, whether that's Mike Glennon, whether that's Gardner Minshew, or this past season Trevor Lawrence, a rookie quarterback. There has been a lot of movement at the quarterback situation, which, yes, that can hurt your production, but at the same time, it can also get you prepared for off-target passes, where if you have a pass that's maybe not exactly where it's supposed to be, that's maybe not perfectly on time because it's just not going to be perfect in the NFL, he's prepared for that. Yesterday, Ben Johnson called wide receiver DJ Chark the X-receiver that Ben Johnson was looking for this offense. And as I said, after watching a lot of these games, especially from 2020, I definitely think the Lions got exactly what they were looking for in terms of when he's healthy and when he's on the field, the kind of player that they're looking for outside the numbers. Quick little refresher on what Ben Johnson said he was looking for at the receiver position, and then we'll dive into DJ Chark specifically. He said this: he was looking for a player that could win consistently outside the numbers. He wanted a player that could win outside the numbers, could spread out the field vertically and horizontally to allow some of those players over the middle to really have even more success. That includes, of course, the players like a TJ Hawkinson and an Amon-Ra St. Brown. We have guys that can win over the middle. Amon-Ra St. Brown becomes the guy immediately that comes to your mind. If you watched like the Green Bay Packers game, for example, he was eating over the middle of the field. But really, the second half of the season, that's where a lot of his production came from. They gave him some reps on the outside because the Lions were struggling to find outside receiver help. Cephas did well stepping in at the beginning of the year when he had to, but the Lions were really struggling to find that. Josh Reynolds was very helpful for them, but we know St. Brown is going to eat over the middle. TJ Hawkinson is going to make most of his production over the middle, and then you had a guy like DeAndre Swift who can make some things happen over the middle, kind of some of the underneath areas. Ben Johnson wanted a guy that could predominantly win outside of the numbers. He said, look, that can come in a lot of different shapes and forms. It can come with a speed receiver, a quickness receiver, a big, strong, play strength type of receiver. He was also looking for a player that could sort of dictate coverage, where you had to be aware of where he was on the field. Sometimes teams' defenses would roll coverage to that side, and it could help open up the run game. In some games, you did see the DJ Chark impact and how defenses had to kind of react to what he did, whether that was cornerbacks that are lined up across from him, having the players soft their zone coverage, the safety on his side, having to give more depth. There were some adjustments that you did see teams make when they saw which side of the field that he was on. Brad Holmes calls him the X-receiver Ben Johnson was looking for, but he also states how with a creative offense coordinator like Ben Johnson, you're going to be able to get him involved in the slot at the Z receiver position. So we'll talk about that, where we think his role best suits him. But let's dive into this. We're going to break it down into a few different categories. We're going to break it down into route running, pass catching, and then, of course, what you can do once the ball is in your hands, and then some other things as well, like field awareness, like football IQ, some of the intangibles. So we'll dive into all of that. Let's start off with the beginning of the route, which is the release and route running. So we'll start there. We've seen him play in a couple of different roles. We've seen him line up in the slot. It's definitely not his primary position. He mainly is an outside receiver, which definitely checks that box for a guy that can predominantly win outside the numbers. That, to me, is where he has his most success, is outside the numbers. He's not a guy that I want to line up in the slot over and over and over. Can he do it? Yeah, I think there's certain packages you can do it with. I think you can use him kind of as a speed slot to drag across the middle. But for the most part, he's going to win consistently on the outside. That's where you want him. Now, we've seen him both line up on the line of scrimmage and off the line of scrimmage, from the X receiver and the Z receiver position. I do believe that he could have a lot of success playing off the line of scrimmage because of how much ground he can quickly cover and how threatening it is to cornerbacks. And when he has a free release, he gets up to speed extremely fast. Now, playing against some of the jams, playing against some of the press situations, one area where I think he could continue to look to improve, and it was something coming out of college, is some of his hand battles to get off of cornerbacks that are trying to be physical with him off the line of scrimmage. This is not the most bulky outside cornerback, but he does show play strength, which we'll get to. However, I think he could be a little bit more consistent with some of those hand battles. He's inconsistent with the strikes, knocking away in a cornerback's hands, getting some of that separation away from a cornerback, kind of giving off of some cornerbacks that are trying to be physical with him early in routes. So while that's a little bit inconsistent, I do think he showed a lot more play strength running through routes than I was expecting to see. When you think about a guy that's, listed as under 200 pounds, but he's 6'4", you're like, man, that guy's really he's really slim, but he plays with a lot of play strength, especially through the upper body. What he does do is he really plays through the route. He continues to run through the route. Chark has shown that he's not afraid of playing through that contact, and he continues to run through the contact, and eventually he gets up to some of that top speed, and at that point it forces cornerbacks to really just turn and run and stop being physical with him because of the top speed that he does have. But some of his routes where he does a really good job, if he will initiate the contact to try to gain some separation, his feet off the line, he has pretty quick feet. You didn't see, I think, a ton of variation in terms of releases, but you also didn't see a ton of guys try to get physical with him. You had the occasional player try to get physical with him off the release, but you didn't see it super often. Even if guys did press, they didn't usually seem to get up on him, and I think it's because of that top speed, where especially if they didn't have safety up over top where you were in the field, and if they didn't have safety up sliding over the top, it was tough to get up and be physical, because if he was going over top, you were going to need all the speed that you can get to keep up with him, specifically in man coverage. So I don't really have too many concerns with his ability to get off the release in man coverage against press coverage corners, because he showed me some of that play strength. He showed the willingness to play through the contact, and he has pretty quick feet off the line. Again, didn't see a ton of variation. He had a lot of speed releases in there, a lot of inside releases that were set up by one outside jab, but I don't have many concerns with that. And of course, against off coverage, I think he could be very successful because he can cover a lot of ground very quickly. I think he does have relatively quick feet for an outside corner. I don't think it best translates for consistently playing in a slot type of role, but you could absolutely do it with him if you wanted to. But we'll talk about even more while I don't think that role necessarily suits him the best, which is fine because we have players that can suit well and fill that role out very well. Think about a Khalif Raymond, right? He could be more successful possibly from more slot reps. Obviously, St. Brown coming out of the draft was a slot receiver, so he's going to be successful there. And there's a lot of guys coming out of this draft that have done a lot of slot work. So this is the type of guy that's going to find most success on the outside. Now transition that into route running as a whole, and I'm really impressed with him as a route runner. He's not a perfect route runner. There's things that I would like to see be a little bit cleaner, especially from down to down, route to route consistency. And I don't know if we saw the most depth in terms of a route tree, but there are some things that I really liked with him as a route runner. First off, let's just address the elephant in the room. The guy is really fast. And with that kind of top end speed, we talk about dictating coverage. I think a lot of times you think of safeties rolling to his side, but also just off coverage against a cornerback, where cornerbacks, especially ones that maybe aren't the fastest cornerbacks, they have to respect this type of top end speed. They'll have to continue to give him cushion, which can allow for comeback routes, any type of curl routes, hitch routes, anything on time where he can usually get that consistent space. Or I think he wins as a route runner is keeping his route integrity. And I think we talked about this, a lot of route receivers when it's, not giving tells, when you're going to make cuts, when you're going to make certain breaks. But I think this is where he really can separate himself as a route runner. So we talk about that top end speed that you have to respect. So let's just say he's going against an outside cornerback. It shows up here as well. He has a great understanding of to make his breaks, to make his cuts, when he can force a cornerback to flip his hips and turn and run, right? When you have a quarterback that's in that back pedal, as soon as you can force them to flip their hips, have to turn and run, then immediately you can transition into that cut as a receiver where you have a cornerback turning his back and you're going to have a ton of space and a ton of room for a quarterback to throw the ball. That's kind of like the money time to throw it. For any cornerback that's not giving him a ton of space, it forces him to have to get quicker into kind of the turn and run mode, speed out routes like that. He understands that, and because he can get up to speed very quickly, he does a great job of selling it that he is going over top. Now, what I think what needs to be improved here is consistency, because there are some routes that he will run and he understands the route that he's running. Doesn't always seem to show that kind of top end speed off the line of scrimmage and always threaten cornerbacks perfectly. But I think this also really shows up in zone coverage. I think he's an outstanding zone coverage beater from the outside receiver position. That's what I took away. You see that awareness of when to turn, when to make your cut as a receiver, but you also see a working zone coverage. One thing he has going for him, and I think this is partly because of his build, he's a really loose mover. So you talk about that body control as a pass catcher, you see that body control as a zone route runner. His ability to kind of just sneak his way through the linebackers, slither his way to an open path is huge, but at the same time, he's a very tall receiver, so he's really easy to see working through that zone coverage, but he can really sink his body. He can kind of just slither around working through zone, but it shows up the same way, understanding what a defender sees. It shows up the same way for him. One thing he does a fantastic job against zone coverage is making sure that he makes his break after he's out of the vision of a zone corner, and he can use that again against those guys. So you'll see it. He won't make necessarily a cut or give a tell away from, let's say, a linebacker covering the middle of the field until he gets behind a linebacker's vision. So he can show that he's going one direction to a cornerback and to a linebacker, but as soon as he gets behind the linebacker's field of vision, he can make his cut right behind that linebacker, and the linebacker's thinking he's going to the right, but all of a sudden he's actually cutting back the other way because he doesn't give that tell before he gets past the linebacker's field of vision. And that can be huge. You know, you talk about being able to find those little spaces, it's things like that. Now, another thing he does good, if you do send him on drag routes, some of those underneath routes, he does do a nice job of slowing down across the middle of the field, making himself a very visible target for a quarterback. He doesn't just sprint through across the middle where it's like, okay, he was there, but now he's gone. He works his way slowly across the middle, especially as soon as he recognizes it's zone coverage, to make sure that he gives this quarterback the best chance to find him working in the middle of the field. Also, another great rep here of working against zone coverage here against Chicago, getting a cover 2 look defensively. So you have this outside cornerback, right, who's playing this zone coverage underneath, and then you have the safety over top. So that means there's kind of that hole between the cornerback and safety. But on this play, they're going to run this out route underneath, which is supposed to hold this cornerback down with the out route so that there's that space between the cornerback and safety. If DJ Chark takes off the line here and he just blows by the cornerback, that's going to be an issue because the timing is going to be there. The cornerback will immediately get depth, which will close that lane between the safety and the cornerback, and then it'll allow him to get back underneath into the play. You can see the route pacing here to kind of just slowly move behind the cornerback. That way he times it up with the out route underneath, which forces the cornerback down. Then he can sit down in that space between the cornerback and safety and make himself a target for the quarterback to kind of just put it in that basket. He allows himself to be very creative with route timing, but at the same time, he could also avoid contact, which can keep route timing on schedule. Like, you think someone's going to be here at this time, at this drop, but then all of a sudden he runs into a player, it's slowed down, now the timing's off. He can kind of just avoid defensive players that he sees. Outside, it's kind of a give and take with a cornerback, right? If a cornerback's going to give him depth, all of a sudden any kind of comeback, hitch route, out route, he's going to have that space where even if a cornerback doesn't end up turning and flipping his hips and he's trying to sell it, he has so much space where if it's underneath pass, he's going to be there. Now, of course, if it's over top, he'll be in a good spot. But if it's underneath, there's going to be a lot of space. Or if a cornerback tries to play a little bit tighter against him to not give that up, he has that speed where you have to respect it, where he can sell it well enough, where you can force the cornerback to turn, flip his hips, and all of a sudden he can get into his cut, and immediately now you have that separation as soon as he turns his back. So I think as a route runner, there's a lot of upside there. It's just some consistency for me, always pushing cornerbacks like that, always forcing them to respect some of that top end speed that you have. In terms of ability to kind of break down from a full sprint, there are some really good reps where he can do it in 2 steps. You know, he can shut it down from 100 to 0 real quick in 2 steps, because I think he's got very loose kind of body control. Times you'll see him kind of give a little bit too much of a tell where he'll start to kind of slow his body down. If a cornerback is giving too much space, which we've seen, it still doesn't always hinder it. Also makes you look at a play like this against Tennessee, and you see this shot play that he's able to create here. All right, so the couple of clips that I want to show here against the Titans, this is the big shot play. You've probably seen it on a highlight before, but it's really all about that route running integrity. So the play action helps, but watch how he pushes this safety in the inside. You see how he's pushing this safety, which is forcing the cornerback to kind of slide in. Because of that, it forces the cornerback cornerback to then overcommit back to the outside with just that subtle step to the outside. Now he's got tons of space up the field on this double move shot play, and of course, the ability to finish here. Now, we're going to take a look at the pass catching next, but that ability to finish is nice. Now, this kind of play could go under the radar, but I don't want to let it go under the radar. Here he is working from the slot. You can see the outside jab, then he's going to come back inside. He's going to turn into man coverage basically with a single high safety, but to me, it's all about that, again, integrity. So you can see how he's going to be continuing to push this cornerback, and as soon as this cornerback communicates with the safety to back off, you can see he immediately starts to kind of flatten this route, drag across the middle. Now the cornerback is in a position where he's trying to chase this play. He's trying to catch up with Chark, and it allows for a ton of separation between him and the safeties. Now, because of this communication between the cornerback and safety, now you can see that this cornerback is backed up. Instead of coming down and passing this off, because DJ Chark held this cornerback, instead of immediately cutting this route flat, it held the safety back on the play instead of him coming down to earlier react to this route and get help. Talk about a receiver's ability to make cuts, sink it to his cuts. What really becomes to me important out of that is the quickness out of those to gain that separation. If you can sink it to a cut, sit down, that's great. But if you don't have the acceleration, that burst out of that cut to then create the space, because that's what a cornerback works on too, is the same thing. I get into a cut, it's about that explosiveness to get out of that and really minimize the amount of snaps that I have to take to break down. But then what about that explosiveness out of that to really gain the separation? That's when separation is gained, and we saw that ability. I think he's pretty light on his toes, pretty quick feet. And there's a lot of plays like this where they would almost run like an arrow route where they'd slide him inside and then have him break back outside, because for him, it's very smooth. He's able to really sell that he's running inside, especially here when you get him on a safety. There's absolutely no chance. You know, you bring pressure and then you get him one-on-one a safety, no chance. But he's able to really sell that he's going inside and cut back outside without losing any sort of play speed, without having to slow down, without having to break down, without having to slow down into that cut. He very smooth, just kind of glides in and out here. He's able to kind of work his way inside, drive aside, nice cut, quick feet, and then gets back outside. Or this one against Green Bay from the slot position. To the next part, which is probably the most important, which is pass catching, being able to catch the football. One thing I will throw out, if you look at it just as stats on Pro Football Reference, and you're like, well, look how many targets he has versus the catches, and you're like, maybe you see like a 57% catch rate, and like that's kind of low. It is important to keep in mind that there were so many throws that technically count as targets that were very uncatchable. They had no chance of being caught. There was a lot of throws like that. And with the quarterback movement that they had, the inconsistency that they had in terms of just offensively as a team, that is expected. So just keep that in mind. There were countless amount of reps I saw where technically he was a target, but there was no chance that the ball was going to be caught by him. It was really in no man's land, but it still counts as a target. So that's something I do want to throw out there. Me as a pass catcher, I think he's a good pass catcher, but there is some hit and miss here. There is some bad that I did take note of. Let's start with some of the good first. First off, body control. I know we say this a lot. We just said it with route running, but it does show up as a pass catcher, and he has some wow catches that you will see. Now, I think when you get inside the 5-yard line, he wasn't utilized as much as, to me, as I thought maybe he would be, as kind of just a straight up fade target. So that will be something to keep in mind. I actually saw one great catch on a slant that he had. He is still a target, maybe just in a different way than maybe what you think of as just a straight up fade target. I also could see him being more of a guy that's utilized in that role with some potential one-on-ones, because he has some wow grabs and ability to really just adjust his body to the football. This is huge. And again, to me, it comes back to maybe the frame that he had. We're going to talk about run after catch in a little bit, but the amount of catches he has away from his body, it almost gets to the point where you're just used to seeing every catch away from his body. Kind of like, honestly, Allen Robinson. The guy is so consistent at catching passes that are outside of his frame or just adjusting to the ball that is in the air. You'll see DJ basically gets a step over top. The cornerback is in trail mode, and this pass is underthrown, but watch him adjust, work back to the football, and just slide down and pluck this thing effortlessly. Loose body movement, which allows him to be extremely flexible, and you see that with some of the grabs that he has, whether that's coming back and scooping a ball off the turf, or whether that's timing a jump up and just plucking the ball out of the air. That is impressive. He has excellent timing on jump balls. That's what I know. I mean, he is consistently timing that jump where he is catching the ball at the highest point. Over and over and over, he is timing that thing up perfectly on jump ball passes, and that is huge. Also, I think when it comes to, let's just say a jump ball specifically, he really shows trust in his hands, and he shows very strong hands. He shows very strong hands where he doesn't have to tuck the ball into his body. He can just kind of pluck it and hold on to it. I think a route like this shows off a lot of his strength. Here he is up on the line. They're going to go to cover 1 defensively. He's matched up against 25 on this play. And you can see he's going to sell this drag over the middle. Now, for a cornerback or a defensive back, you really have to sprint to try to keep up with this guy. And then since he's able to make those smooth transitions to cut back out, which shows a lot of flexibility in his route tree, you can see the play strength, work through the contact, come back to the ball, and make a big play. That opens up a lot in the book of what you can do in terms of timing routes, the ability to play through contact, to draw multiple defensive holdings, which I saw. It's a lot of flexibility in the ankles. It's kind of a backfire here. And this is where I say there's an issue. And it's not as much as the initial catch as it is kind of the process of the catch. For me, I think there's a little bit of a delay between catching a pass and sometimes tucking it into his body, specifically when he's going out and snagging a pass with his hands. If he's not letting the ball come to him and he's snagging a pass, there is a delay that's noticeable. And I've seen it from every year I've seen where there's a slight delay at times from catching the pass to immediately getting it to a tuck. It's a little choppy. It's not always a very smooth transition from catch to tuck. And because of that, there are times where you'll see the ball may get punched out very late. There's times where he doesn't always come up with it. Now, it may still count as a catch, but he doesn't always come up with the football at the end. There are some fumble concerns there. Examples where he's just delayed to doing it. He'll catch it and kind of hold it like this. Like instead of tucking it, he'll kind of hold it like he's holding, I don't know, like a baby or something. He'll hold it like a baby for a second and then he'll tuck it in. And that can lead to some of the process at times, I think, of finishing through the process. It's probably just, you know, a muscle memory thing, but I would say just consistently work on catch, tuck, catch, tuck, catch, tuck. I think I sort of kind of alluded to it, but he does let passes to his body. Now, it really hasn't shown up as an issue aside from the tuck factor. One thing it does is it mitigates that transition between catch and tuck. So when he does let the ball come more to his body, it works out perfectly because he's more in the catch and run type of stage. He can have a tendency to kind of let passes into his body. And it doesn't, to me, it didn't show up as an issue in the games that I watched, but it is something to note. We've seen guys be successful like that in the NFL, but it just is something to note that there are some passes, and he's a good over-the-shoulder type of pass catcher, and he has great body control, but it's almost just like he kind of just looks to let that ball into his body. You'll see it scoop right by his helmet, and if you do things like that and you're in a close, you know, contested area, when you get hit, that ball can be jarred loose. But it's not like he doesn't show the ability to go pluck it. If it's in a contested situation and he recognizes that, he's going to go up and snag that football, and he shows very strong hands throughout the play. So for me, it's something to note, but it wasn't something that necessarily showed up as an issue to me. And in fairness to him, the amount of passes he had like this, where he has to slide down, jump up, catch something away from his body, it's like Allen Robinson, honestly, almost to another level. Now, I did see one rep here where I was a little concerned, where it looked like when he was catching the football, his head was turning before he completely brought the ball in and tucked it away, where it was almost like he knew that he was going to get hit. But you have to be fair to him, because even in those reps where maybe you saw him peak a little bit, he still came up with the football. In his plays like this, it's a late pass on a corner route that kind of forces him to hold up a little bit. Yeah, could he go get this maybe a little more? Sure. But it's forcing him to hold back, knowing the safety's coming down, and he sticks in there and takes a hit. He could have just ran out of bounds, but he took the hit. You want a guy that's best on the outside, a guy that's not afraid to go pluck the ball, which he isn't. You know, a guy that's really dangerous as a route runner on the outside. He is that. But when you get him over the middle, you know, there seems to be sometimes some awareness of that, hey, I'm going to get hit. This all kind of transitions into run after the catch. And I don't think he was dynamic once the ball was in his hands. From the games I watched, which I would say was about, 7 or 8 today, from those games that I watched today, I would say that he didn't seem extremely threatening once the ball was in his hands. And I think that does stem from sort of the process of the pass catching situation that you're in. Do you actually have an opportunity to run after the catch? Style of grabs that he does have over the middle, it's a little bit more of letting the ball kind of get to his body. It's a bit more focused on actually on protecting the football. One thing that I also think kind of knocks down some of what he can do after the catch is there are reps where he'll leave the ground, he'll leave his feet on passes that he doesn't need to because of his wingspan, but he'll leave his feet to make the grab. Well, once you do that, there's not much happening after the catch. And then again, it's kind of that bobbly transition, clunky transition. You can see where he's snagging a pass and to bringing it into his body. It's not an immediate boom, boom, go. It's a little bit, it's a little bit more delayed than that I've noticed. Where he can be a threat is just pure speed. We've seen screens thrown his way. He's not usually, juking guys out, making guys miss in a phone booth. You don't see him do that. You don't see him like running over players, but he does have speed. And if you get him in a space, that's where he's dangerous. It's just as simple as that. The guy is fast. He has a punt returner background. Notice, and I think this shows up as the punt returner background, is it can be kind of catch and wait and try to see everything rather than catch and go. And when, you're playing receiver spot, that's not going to work as well as it is a punt returner where you're kind of waiting and seeing everything develop. There isn't much development that he's seeing happen when you're a receiver, but it's just pure speed. If If you get him on a deep ball and there's no in front of him, he can just route run everybody to the end zone. Plays like this are why you have to respect him over the top. You get a cover 3 drop, you got 3 guys on one side, so the safety's looking there, quarterback looks it off, and he's gone. Just blows by your corner. That's something that, because of his ability to do things like this, you'll see a lot of team safeties. Yeah, quarterback may be looking that direction, but you still have to cheat a little bit to his direction because you put him one-on-one on one side and you look him off, and all of a sudden the safety starts to jump to the strong side of the field. One-on-one, he can just blow by your corner like that. And you can see him just run the ball. And if you drop it over his shoulder, which he's a good over-the-shoulder pass catcher, he can be gone. If you get him on a screen, he gets a couple blocks. He is super fast. He can fly through a lane and be gone. But that's the only real threatening thing I saw with him with a ball in his hands. Aside from that, I wouldn't really say run after catch is going to be a huge thing that he brings to the table. But at the same time, for the role that I think we're looking for, he doesn't need to be great in that area. And it's hard to find guys that are consistently great after the ball is in their hands. I just didn't really notice that with him. Now, a couple last notes I will throw in here when you talk about like football IQ, things like that. I think he does some things really well. I noticed with field awareness, and this could honestly go to pass catching if you wanted to, but his field awareness is understanding where he is on the field. And he always seems to know where his feet are and how to get 2 feet in bounds. Where that's a jump ball where he made, just that ridiculous catch against Chicago. Or that's, kind of sitting down in the back of the end zone, slowing his pace to understand, I got to get my feet in bounds here. And you'll even see it on passes that he doesn't catch. The recognition of, okay, my feet are here. I can't go leap and try to make this grab because I'm going to end up being out of bounds. It's just kind of the field awareness, the sideline awareness to stop himself without having to look down. That is big time. Also, he seems to understand why he's running the route that he's running and what the play is supposed to be doing. Why I'm doing what I'm doing in this play. Because sometimes the play isn't designed to go to you. You're just running a route. But why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think you saw it on even a pick play where he kind of put his arm out. You don't want to see him, grasp one and get flagged. But you see the awareness of, okay, I'm running this route to kind of get this guy open. So I need to run this route this way. Again, we talk about getting behind a linebackers or a player's field of vision. There's that understanding of why I'm running my route, how I need to run my route, because what's the ultimate end goal of this play? Instead of just draw it on paper and go do that. We'll say this is a blocker. He definitely wasn't someone that I thought was a very great blocker. He was actually one of those players that you saw when they went to some of their tight sets, tight formations. Sometimes he would come off the field if they were going to, run the ball. We saw that sometimes last year, like Tom Kennedy would come on and it was like, oh, we're running the football. He would be a guy that would come off the field. Definitely didn't see a lot of impact as a blocker. Sometimes he wasn't always willing to stick his nose in there, and I don't love that. But at the same time, you need a guy that can win a one-on-one on the outside. He's strong. He's strong in the upper body, 16 bench press reps at his build. Definitely physically capable to do it. You just need to see him do it. To juvenize, and he's going to get after it. And maybe that rubs off on him here because I know he has the strength to do so. You just didn't really see it. But one thing you did see is energy. The guy's full of dance moves, which is nice because, if I know Flourier was kind of killing it with some of his dance moves when he made plays. It'd be nice to have a guy that can kind of bring that flavor back. St. Brown had some of that. Hey, as long as you make plays, I love the dance move, man. Nothing wrong with it. And he brings a ton of energy. He's that type of player that'll make a grab and talk right to the corner right after it's made. That's that competitive fire that he brings, and that's the way that he shows it is by talking to the opponent. I've seen him give high fives to the opponent that he's just beat. I'm like, what the heck? Who does that? The biggest thing will be injuries with him because he's had an injury history. We've talked about it. Last year, of course, the big one, he had the pedal ankle fracture, and that wasn't the first time we've seen it. We've seen it back in 2019. We've seen it show up in 2020. So it's something that there is willing to be concerned about, and it's part of the reason that you gave him a 1-year deal. Now, when you look at his cap hit for this season, it definitely works out well for the Lions. It's only $4 million, but they've also placed 2 void years. He's basically locked in for this year. When you look at his dead cap, which is $10 million, doesn't make sense to move on from him. So he's locked for this year. A couple void years thrown on there, and like Brad Holmes said, if it works out, best case scenario, he plays well, he earns a contract, we resign him. It's a prove it type of deal in a way, but at the same time, he said it works out for both parties. It's best for both parties. I'm happy to have the guy. The biggest thing is going to come down to health. It's as simple as that. And it's why the Lions need to add more receiver help because you know that he's had the injury history. So to just act like, well, it's just hopefully it doesn't happen, that's just not being aware of the situation. You have to be aware of the fact that he's been hurt. So you have to take the cautionary approach to be like, okay, what happens if we don't have him? How do we adjust to this? I hope he's healthy, but you just understand that it's something that's there. Now, it's an ankle injury, right? It's a fractured ankle, so that's different than maybe something else that could be much more serious. But it's just something to be aware of. And we've seen him come back, and we've seen him play well from it. But it's just something that you have to be aware of. It's part of, I think, the contract and why it was like it was. And you have to be prepared for that as a team. But when Ben John says what Ben John says he's looking for in a receiver, to me, he checks all of those boxes. And he brings the Lions that. Usually with a lot of guys, you can be like, well, he could be dominant from the slot. This is a player that to me is predominantly the most successful from the outside. And to me, that's what the Lions needed big time. They got guys that can work the middle, but a guy that can get over outside and open up the hawks and open up the slots and open up the run game. I mean, when you talk about how do you open up the run game, when you have a split coverage look and you're forcing one safety to get more depth pre-snap and give a little bit more cushion because of however the cornerback's going to play it. Let's say you're in a cover 2 zone. Outside corner is not going to run with a vertical route. Well, at that point, your safety on that side may have to force to get more depth early in the play because of the fact that they know he can just run by. Josh Reynolds has some speed, but you don't come into it and you're like, oh gosh, watch out for Josh Reynolds. He might just burn by our cornerback, and as a safety, you have to be prepared to be able to get over there. For a safety with Chark, if you're in a cover 2 look, you have to be prepared that, if he gets past that cornerback and he does go over top, I need some room to be able to catch up with him. I'm going to need to kind of cheat to that spot, maybe have to give more depth pre-snap, and all of a sudden you got one safety backed up 5 yards further than normally he would be. Now it opens up run lanes. Now it opens up play action over the middle. It opens up all those things. As a pass catcher, I think he's prepared for this. You saw a lot of off-target passes back where he was, and he's made some fantastic body control grabs. To me, it's not like he showed issues pass catching. It's just little things that you're like, oh, I wish that was, maybe a little different. But he's shown ability to catch the ball in a multitude of ways. The route running sticks out, and I think he is exactly what the Lions needed. If he can stay healthy, he will be a monster addition for the Lions. I can't guarantee what his production will be, but he'll get a lot of snaps. With a good offensive coordinator like Brad Holmes said, you can get versatile with him because he could do different things. You can get matchups. You can get him in a speed slot looks, and you can have him just burn across the middle of the field. We've seen touchdowns on that from him in the past. But this is a player that I think that's 25 years old. And in this type of offense, it's what the Lions needed. It's what the Lions were looking for. And hopefully it works itself out and we're able to bring him back. We're able to re-sign him after this season. It's a great opportunity for him, and it should be a great opportunity for the Lions. I like the signing. I'm glad to see they're already working out. And this player's got a chip on his shoulder. He's like, I'm glad I'm in a place where I'm wanted. Sound a lot like Jared Goff. That chip on his shoulder to go out there and ball out. And I think there's going to be more consistency here from the quarterback spot and more consistency from a play calling going in year 2 because you know what you have. It's not like last year we're kind of funneling around between, okay, what guy does what best? You know what you have coming in after last year. Now you can hit the ground running. And hopefully Chark can just slot right into that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Again, answer the question. Would you be down for some black uniforms to return? I absolutely would be. Thank you, Brad, for watching, and I'm out.